2, 1, and we are live with Sasha Dees in.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? Say hi to the world, Sasha.
Hi, world.
Before we start, I just love your name. I think it's such like a movie star, rock star name. Sort of, I'm Sasha Dees. You know, I love it. I love it.
It's it's a name that my mom got from a book. So it's not a family-related name, which often happens, right? But she didn't like my grandmother's names. And so one grandmother was called Sarah, and so she made Sasha. And one grandmother is called Adriana, and she made Annabelle. She has 2 daughters. So that's how we got her name. They came from books.
Oh. And you're also an author. Lovely. So before we get into what you do and your story, we're going to talk about food.
Yay! I love food.
And specifically Caribbean food.
Right.
So I understand, like you gave me, as I said in the description, you've been to more Caribbean islands than I've got fingers, you know? Wow. Okay, so let's start. Where have you been to in the Caribbean?
Do I need to list all of them?
Well, just give us a run through. I'll put the actual destinations on the screen.
Yeah. So I've been to Anguilla, Aruba, Bahamas, Barbados, Bonaire, Barranquilla in Colombia, Cayman Islands, Cuba, Dominican Republic.
You see what I'm saying, people? Wow! I'm astounded. I mean, like, what sort of time frame did you go through all these islands? When did you start traveling?
I mean, that's only half of them anyway. Also, but it's the first time I went. So it's a time frame of 25 years. But then in the past 4 years, so from 2017 to 2019, I actually really stayed in the region, island hopping, doing research to contemporary art infrastructure. So then it really became a lot of islands that I also visited for the first time. And some like Dominican Republic and Trinidad I had been before. Others like Puerto Rico or St. Croix I had been before. So it was a mixture of islands that I knew and islands that I didn't know. The first one was Curacao. And I was not even 20 when I went there. I went with 2 friends to their parents who lived on the island, and they lived in Holland. And I just went with them, and I had an amazing time. It was also very different than I thought it would be, so it was a bit of a culture shock. And it made me realize, like, you think the world is the same everywhere as how you know your world. And it really sort of made me realize, wow, okay, the world is actually different everywhere. You know, I mean, what you know is only your world. And everything outside your world is the rest of the world, and it can be very different from what you know, or how you live. It's very different, and that I think it was a culture shock, but it was also good to have that experience so early on in life, to realize, like, wow, okay, you can't just assume everybody has the same experience and context that you have, and that's a very valuable lesson to have.
What shocked you the most about the place? I mean, the difference.
I think what was because I was not even 20 and a girl, and in Holland, like as a girl, you had a lot of freedom that you didn't even realize is a freedom. You could do things that I didn't realize elsewhere in the world women were not doing, or not allowed to do, or supposed to do. In Holland, it would be totally normal for me to go study or go work and live by myself. And that was not so normal in Curacao at the time. I mean, it's different now,
right.
But, realize it's like 30 years ago, it's a different world, right? So that I mean, that was one of the things that has stayed with me. Like, although that has changed over there as well, to me at that time, I was like, wow, you know, I mean, because I was contemplating maybe living there for a longer time and sort of working there and spending some maybe a year or a year of two. And I just realized, okay, I wasn't prepared for those differences. You know, like how I was perceived as a woman or as a girl. I mean, it wasn't even a real woman yet. Was so different from what I was used to. And I realized, well, I wasn't going there to start a feminist movement or anything, you know. So
How long did you go there for?
I ended up staying 2 months. And it was interesting because then I realized, like, my friends from there had said, like, because I said, oh, and then I might stay longer. And they're like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And then one of the older people from the island said, well, you know, she's like young and she wants to experience her own things. And, you know, she's this, yeah, we say in Dutch, eigenwijs. I don't know how you say that in English, but, you know, I want to have my own way. And so she's like, just go. And she's like, yeah, I'm sure she comes back, but let her figure that out herself. It'll be a valuable lesson. And it actually was. She was right, you know. She was right that it was a valuable lesson. And she was right that I came back. So that's okay. I think what I also learned is that, you know, if you really want to do something, you should just try and also be okay if it's not working, you know, but because you won't regret it. At least you tried and you will think about it. And
We
for
all
me,
need these experiences in life. We all
yeah, and for me, it also meant that later on in life, I was still curious about the region, but I knew that I had to prepare myself better, or that I didn't have to expect where I was going to be the same as what I know. So I learned to travel, to arrive, and not have any opinions, but just at the beginning, just sit still and observe. What is this place? How do people behave? What do they eat? What do they do? How, you know, what are the norms and the values of this place? So you can sort of find your way in that, so that you don't disrupt the place, but also can be comfortable with who you are. So you have to sort of, you know, have to find this place where that is fluid and can happen in a way that is okay for me and okay for the country and the people in it. You know what I mean?
right. So, because you've been to so many Caribbean islands, what I'm going to ask you is, food-wise,
Yeah.
which islands or which countries struck you the most regarding their food?
Yeah, I guess all the islands have their own sort of particular foods, but of course, you know,
So
I was
what was your favorite?
yeah,
What
so
stood
I
out
was
for you?
introduced first to the food of Curacao, so I remember that, and then the food in Suriname, because it's very diverse, because it has a very diverse population, and other than the other islands and countries in the Caribbean, they also have people from Indonesia, which is a very particular kitchen that you can then only eat in Suriname, really. And you know, and then of course Trinidad. You know, I mean, hey, I'm talking to you, so like shark and bacon shark. I don't
Right.
know what the right
Yeah.
and the doubles. I love the doubles. Yeah. But
So,
Curacao, like the first food I learned was it's called cargo in Curacao, cargo, and it's conch basically.
right.
And so we didn't know that in Holland, and we have a smaller type of that shell. So the people that are from Curacao here, they use that, and I loved it. And then funchi, which is sort of like polenta in Europe or fufu in Africa. You know, it's this
Right.
corn, and so at first it was sort of, I mean, you know, like I had to acquire the taste, I guess, and it's very heavy.
Yes. Yes.
Um, which, makes sense because it's this food. If there's not a lot of food around, at least, your stomach is full.
Yes.
But I loved it because you could also make it and then slice it and fry it and then eat it with fish. And then they have this Creole sauce with like onions and garlic and tomato and we call that muggy lock.
Was that in Curacao or
Well, I learned to eat it in Holland because of my friends. And then, of course, when I went with them to Curacao, I of course, like Carco, I actually then learned to eat like the right way, the bigger one that is in the Caribbean.
I think
And
over
for
here,
instance,
if I'm not mistaken, over here in Trinidad, I think this similar or same thing is called cuckoo.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a corn
And,
mixture. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I love that. And then we would, the house of the parents was like near the beach. And then we would go out, like with the boys would have like a hook and they would sort of catch octopus. And I mean, it was the first time I kind of saw that. That was not something that was, on the menu in Holland.
Right.
We have
Yeah,
herring.
yeah.
You guys have octopus. And so that was, that of course was much fun to sort of try to catch that and then eat it, take it home and eat it. And they make this soup. It's called Kadushi. It's a cacti. It's made of cacti. And it's like this slimy type of soup.
That's cactus, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
And
So how does that taste?
I mean, it was a little weird in the beginning because it's so slimy, but it's actually nice. I like it. Yeah, and it depends. They throw all kinds of stuff in it, like, so, and then and also what was strange was they would sort of fry the blood of goats, and it's called sangar Kabritu, and then you eat that with
So
rice
that's
or
like a black pudding, similar to.
Yeah, made of and then, Holland, we have cows, but, and some sheep, but not really goats, like we don't really, goat meat is not something that is normally on the menu in Holland, so that is very different. So I like that about travel. You get to eat these things that you don't know, and at first it's kind of like, oh gosh, what is this, and then you learn how to appreciate it, Yeah.
So do you have conchs in Holland?
No, so like I said, it's not because they're quite big, right? And we have a small thing. It's like this big.
Right.
It's called wulk, but it's not something we eat actually.
Right.
But it is what people from the Dutch islands then use instead because that is what is available and it's most similar to what they, would eat back home. But it's not a Dutch thing to eat, really. No.
Yeah. When I was living in England, we always used to have a little battle with the French. Well, it's ongoing with the history of England and France. And when I used to go to school trips to France, somehow we'd always end up in skirmishes or scuffles with some of the French kids.
Yeah.
And we used to call them weird. You know what kids are like?
Yeah.
Because they ate snails.
Yeah.
And in England, that was never heard of really in England.
Oh,
So
that we do eat in Holland.
Right.
Like the little, yeah.
Right. And it's big over here in the Caribbean. I've never tried it yet. I was going to try it on our local version of the food show, but because of Rona or CV, everything got cancelled, so I never actually got to try conch yet. But it's on my list of things to do, definitely. Yeah. So the Caribbean. So if you had to pin down your favorite Caribbean dish, what would you pick out?
That's I think that's a hard one. My friends always tease me because sometimes I eat something and I'm like, oh God, this is great. I love this. And, you know, like the longer you know me, the more, you know, like friends would say like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, you know, the next meal you say you love that too. You just love food. And I do.
Yeah.
And I just love food. I also eat a lot. Like, you know, it's another thing friends know of me. Like, I have never been on a diet in my life ever. I just eat. And like, I have one couple of friends who always tease me when they invite me to dinner. Like, the joke is that they do extra grocery shopping because I'm coming and I eat more than anybody else. So it's hard because it's also typical, it's also different. It has different reasons why you like it. For instance, how I like the doubles, you know, but you eat that in the morning. And so
You eat yours. I can't eat doubles in the morning. I have to eat it like after I've eaten something.
well,
Yeah.
that's how I was introduced to it. So
Right.
to me,
It's like a
uh,
breakfast.
it's a breakfast food because
Ah,
that's how I got introduced to it. Like when I came to Trinidad in an artist in residency in Alice Yard. It was Christopher Cochet who would like come and get me in the morning, and he introduced me to the doubles as a breakfast food. So I've never even thought about eating doubles for lunch or in the evening, to be honest. I mean,
yeah.
it's something you eat for breakfast.
Well, in England, curry is big in especially London. You'd find like curry shops just like you would find Chinese
Yeah,
takeaway
yeah,
shops.
yeah, of course.
And they love when they have like a hot curry, they'll call it, it's like a vindaloo, it's a hot spicy curry. They love having that with a beer because
Okay,
they complement each other in a way.
yeah,
And I find a hot peppery doubles with our local beer stag, for me, oh, that is
that's
so
it.
delicious. That does
Yeah,
it for me. Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, but you know, like I was saying before, like I also like the variety of the Surinamese kitchen. You know, like they have a dish called pom, and it's a root that you then grate,
Right.
and then you sort of mix it with some spices, and you make some sauce, and you mix that, and then you make chicken, so separate first, and then you throw that in there, and then all of that goes into the oven.
All right.
But
Looking at the dish,
yeah,
when it comes out of the oven, to me it looks like macaroni pie. It
yeah,
looks
yeah, yeah,
similar to
yeah,
that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
obviously it's not.
And it's so the root is called pomtire, and it's not some. It's yellow, so it looks like those packages that you have of grated cassava, for instance. But
Oh,
it's yellow, and I only know it from Suriname. It's nowhere else somehow, you know. Like so, when I was in New York, I would make it sometimes, but I had to either bring it from Suriname or bring it from Holland because there's a large Surinamese population, so they import it, but it doesn't even exist in the US. I've never found it there in any, and even in Chinatown, which often has lots of stuff that nobody else has. I couldn't find it really. So that's a really delicious dish, and then you have like cakes are nice, and you have a cake called boyo, and it's with coconut, grated coconut, and um, then you have all the Indonesian foods like sauto soup. It's like a specific soup with chicken and sprouted beans and a hard-boiled egg, and you know, and then they have like this soy sauce, but it's sweet, and then they make it peppery with sweet. It's a really nice kind of taste. I mean,
but
I can go on and on about
but
food,
if
man.
you're telling me that you're not going to give me one favorite, one thing that sticks out in your mind from
I
any of the countries.
refuse. There's so much,
Right.
you know. I mean, it's yeah, it would be a pity to just say one,
Right. Um,
right? I mean,
I
I
understand.
think.
But in Holland,
Hmm.
when you have to go and get Caribbean food in
Hmm.
Holland, where would you go? I mean,
Well,
is it
the
only in the main
most,
cities?
yeah, the most known Caribbean food in Holland is Surinamese food because there are as many. people from Surinamese descent here as there is a population in Suriname. So there are lots of, I mean, there's not a lot of like fancy restaurants, but there's like all these takeaways with, you know, a couple of tables, and you can, you know, either take it or eat it. And so all of that food is, yeah, you can find that almost anywhere, unless, you know, it's a really small village and no Surinamese people live there. But you know, when I'm in Holland, I live in Amsterdam, and there's like a Surinamese takeaway on, well, if it's not on every corner, it's on every other corner, I suppose.
Okay. And what are the popular dishes there?
Yeah, so it would be that pom. It would be like, you know, like for lunch, maybe the sauto soup. You have brown beans and rice, and it's like I think in elsewhere it's the pink beans that we use. So it's a little different. Throughout the Caribbean, it's a different kind of bean that's used. If you would make palau, for instance, it's a different bean than the bean in this dish.
Right. Yeah, sometimes you get red beans, say pink beans, black-eyed peas, and all this kind of stuff. But
yeah. And then you have like the more Indonesian dishes like bami and nasi, which is bami is like a noodle, and nasi is like a fried rice. And then there's a couple of others, but it's not so much. So you would find maybe like one or two Jamaican restaurants, or there is some, but of course, like, it's not England. I think it's so much attached to, you have the kitchens of the islands that you used to colonize, right? That's what that is. Of course, that's why curry is so big in England, or jerk chicken, or, you know. Yeah, so we have a lot of Surinamese. The Surinamese population is much bigger than the population from the islands. So I guess the food, and they've been here longer as well. So it's more established. That food is more established here, I think.
Is there any particular shop that you can remember the name of? Any popular ones over there?
Yeah, you have like Span Macandra in Amsterdam. You have Warung Winnie in Rotterdam. I mean, there's all these. You have the Draver, which is this very home cooked meals. You know, where only Surinamese people and people who know a lot of Surinamese people go. You know?
Those were the names of the shops.
Yeah.
Right. And what are they? Single shops or chains?
No, most are single shops.
What?
Yeah, there's not too many chains. There used to be in Amsterdam. You had a place called Chins, and they used to make these breads. Like in the morning, Surinamese people would eat bread, and then you would put meat or fish or like curry, egg on it, or like there's this typical things you put on like a very specific white. Yeah, almost like a small French bread, I guess. And so that was a very popular store who also would sell some groceries. And they had, I mean, you know, like a chain in Holland often has like 50 stores. So, but they would have like maybe 3 or 5 or something. But most of the time it's just a family starting, you know, they start a little takeaway store, and that's how they make a living, right?
True. So if I was to ask you, what is the national dish of the Netherlands? What would you say?
I think, well, for breakfast we eat bread and cheese. You know, cheese is huge in Holland. And I mean, I have to say, I'm really a cheesy person. Like, you know, I would, when I travel, I bring my cheese in my suitcase. And
you're not serious.
No, I am.
You
am. Like when I used to like go back and forth between New York, I would have like, you know, like an apartment in New York, and would have clothes and everything. So I would come with a suitcase. And then when they open it, like, you know, ordinarily people travel and they have like toothbrush and clothes and stuff like that. And I would have like cheese, you know. 6 kilos of cheese. And then the pom tire, so I could make pom, you know.
So
And
you
they
were
would
talking
like,
about
what is this?
So you would basically have a cold breakfast.
Yes, yes. It's really bread and cheese really is the traditional one. And then if you eat more, you would have bread and cheese, which is like the more salty, right? And then you could have a slice of bread with some jam, you know, like strawberry jam or jelly, right? So you have a little something sweet. And then it's a very dull kitchen. So basically, very traditional Dutch food is cooked potatoes, cooked vegetables, and then some meat fried with nothing. Like, you know, in the Caribbean, you do like onions and garlic and tomato and all kind of spices. We just fry it and that's it. Some salt, maybe.
So what's the name of the dish? Sorry.
That could just be anything. So you have cooked potatoes with a vegetable. A vegetable could be a carrot, it could be kale, it could be endive, or, you know, like, it doesn't really matter. And then some meat. And the meat, I mean, I think traditionally it would be like pork or beef and chicken. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
So
and
nothing.
it's very bland, and it's all these foreign dishes like Indonesian food also. I mean, I also like Asian food. That kind of gave me a taste of spicing food, you know, and spicy food as well, because traditionally Dutch food is very bland.
Well, I think the
But
same with
yeah,
England.
then we started colonizing, right? So we got all these spices like we used, for instance, a lot of nutmeg because that was a spice we had a monopoly on. And I found that I think to me that's such an ordinary spice. It's so common to use, and elsewhere it's really not. And I realized, you know, it takes a while before you're realizing, oh, it's because we had a monopoly. So of course, for us, it's really cheap and everybody uses it. But it's also the thing we make a lot of money on. So it's expensive for everybody else. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's how you learn about how colonization works, right? And capitalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, as I say, like the national dish for Holland, it's a variation of things. It's a different possibility of
Yeah, well,
different dishes. Like as I say, the
the difference
vegetables
really
and
is in the vegetable. So, I mean, because it's really like there's always the cooked potato, and then
always. Okay.
yeah, and then a veggie, and the veggie traditionally would be the veggie of the season, and because we have 4 seasons, you know, some vegetables you eat in wintertime. So kale or Brussels sprouts is a winter vegetable. So I grew up on a farm and we had like a large garden with our own, we would only eat our own food. So in the wintertime, it's kale and Brussels sprout, and you keep on eating that all over again. Carrots go a long way, you know, some onions. You have a dish in the winter where you mash everything, like the carrot, onion, potato, you mash it, and then you smack, I don't know, some meatloaf ball on it or something. Yeah, and that's what you eat. It's not very imaginary. So nowadays, people, because you know you're used to all these different spices and ways of cooking, of course, it became more elaborate. Or since I grew up on a farm, like I would also ordinarily eat meat like rabbit and hare and pheasant because that's what we would shoot. You know, we would hunt and shoot, and that's what we would eat. And then when I moved to the big city, I realized, I found out it's really expensive. So, I would say that and they would look at me as if, like, who eats that on a weekday? But of course, when you grow up on a farm and they're around, it actually, it cost zero because, you know,
elbow grease,
you just
yeah.
shoot it, go and get it, and make it. But that's considered a very fancy food then. Yeah.
We're going to talk about you and
Uh-oh.
where you have your work,
Yeah.
your art, your books. You're a
Well, it's only
creator,
one. It's only one book.
and you've just released it. So tell us a little bit about your book, please.
Yeah. So I've been working with artists in the Caribbean and artists from the Caribbean, outside of the Caribbean, for about 25 years, and the book is sort of comes from that. You know, it's sort of from working with one set of people led to another and led to another. I had a talk yesterday, and Chris Cozier was saying like how the like the, what was he saying? It's like gosh, now I'm missing the expression, but there's these unexpected happy experiences that just happen. Like the first time I went to Trinidad, it was a transfer because I was flying to Suriname, and it's a really long transfer. So you arrive from New York to Trinidad, and you arrive at like 6 in the morning, and the flight to Suriname is 12 at night. So you have that whole day that you have to sort of wait for your connection. And so the first time I came, I arrived and I realized, wow, okay, this is a really small airport. It's not as if I have anything to do here. So I was with a group of people. We were going to perform in Suriname. So I rented a little van and asked the person at the car rental, like, where is the closest beach? I figured I'd just drive everybody there and at least we can sleep on the beach or something. And so we went there, and I was just sort of walking on the beach, and then, you know, it's like 7 in the morning.
Which beach did you go to?
I don't remember. I don't remember what the beach was.
Marcus?
No, it was not that, because it was a longer stretched one than that, and it wasn't that nice in that way. Marcus is a nice beach with like more white sand, right?
Yes, but I'm thinking of one that's closest to the airport. So
yeah. I can't remember.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I can't remember. And so I'm walking on the beach, and I see somebody walk towards me, and the more we come closer, we realize it's a friend of mine. So she's born in Guyana. I know her from Holland. And like at 7 in the morning, there's nobody on the beach. I'm actually walking into a friend of mine. You know?
Crazy.
So that was, I know, it was so ridiculous. But so stuff like that happens a lot to me. Happy accidents, I think Chris is calling it.
The traveling you've done,
yeah,
you're going to get happy accidents and others.
Happy accidents happen all the time, you know. So there's all these connections then, and so I really like that, and the book came from that, because after a couple of years you become that person that knows so many people from the region and realize that they actually don't know each other, and there's also not that many people like me who know that many people in the region. So I, you know, like they were curious, like, you know, they would say, oh, you know, I'm really curious. Oh, you went to that island. What is there? You know, and I would talk about it. And they went, oh, it would be so practical if somebody documents it, and it would sort of be known, and we would know how we could find each other. And that is what happened with the book. So the 2 years I traveled, I mapped out and talked with everybody and sort of made this database of what is available on all these different islands I went to, and who is working there within contemporary art specifically. And that's what the book, so in the book I sort of explain a little bit about me traveling and how long I have been working in this field and who do I meet while I travel, and you see certain voices come back. So from Trinidad, Alishard and Chris have been very instrumental in me getting to know people and going places. On Curacao, I talk a lot with Sharali Emanuelson, who I have worked with a long time.
So where is the book available?
It is available. It just came out in December last year, and so everybody can order it. It's the problem, of course, is like it's in Holland. It's the book costs €30. But shipment of a book to the Caribbean is actually, I found out, there's all kind of new regulations that the US implemented after the pandemic and all their terrorism fear, etc. So it costs almost as much to actually ship it as well, which makes it a little expensive. So there is also an EPUB, so it's an electronic book that you just get a file and you can read it either on your computer or you can print it out, I guess. It's like getting a PDF or something.
And how much is the electronic file?
$18.95, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So, as you can see, we've put the link up on the screen, and it's also in the description for your book. So
Yeah.
you've also been over here doing a lot of art and working it with a name you've mentioned a lot is Mr. Cozier.
Yeah, so he is one of the three founders of Alishard. So it's Chris together with Nicholas Laughlin, and people probably know him in Trinidad from, he's an editor for Caribbean Beat, the magazine in the airplanes. He writes for that a lot, and then he's also the program director of Boca's Literary Festival, that people might know as well. So he's a writer, he's more in that field. And then Sean Leonard, who's an architect. He has an architect agency in Port Spain.
What agency, sorry?
An architect.
Oh,
he
right.
makes buildings. And so the organization is in a building, Granderson in Belmont. It used to be they would do activities in the yard. That's why the name Alice Yard. And Alice was I think the great grandmother of Sean, and it was part of a family plot. But since I think a couple of years, he bought another building because other family members also wanted to do something with that plot. And so they do all these activities within contemporary art, but also Moko Jumbi and Robert Young, who's a fashion designer. He is part of that, is in the building. He's not part of the organization necessarily, but he's sort of linked to it. And it's an exciting group of people who really try to make connections within the region, outside the region. They have a small residence, so there's a small bedroom and a kitchen and a place where you can work, and then you can't apply for it, so you have to be invited. So like a happy accident need to happen that you meet one of them and they like you and they invite you over, and you pay for that yourself, but they offer you like the space you could use for free, and then they introduce you to all kind of people that you are interested in. And so they utilize their network, which is fantastic because you really get to know people in Trinidad, and people in Trinidad who, certainly young people who might not be able to travel as much yet, maybe financially not, get to meet all these people from outside the island, which is, it sort of sparks all kind of discourse, and you get to know about the differences. You can talk about your art with a new person that might have a new perspective on it. So I think they do really good work in literature, in visual art, in interdisciplinary performance art. It's exciting. People should really go and check out all these activities that they do. So Christopher does a lot of contemporary visual art. And then Nicholas is more like literature. And then, of course, because they have the location, they can also make these different links. So, for instance, and then you have Christoph, who does little publishing. He has a print, and he does like small booklets. But he also is very involved in the whole Mokojumbi and teaching young children how to stilt walk and with all of that, and also Robert Young being on the ground floor of the building, they're very involved in carnival. And Sean describes it as being a mass camp, but not only during carnival time, but 12 months a year. So there is this sort of tight organization, you know, with all these like cross virtualization, and it's that makes it really nice, you know, because you sort of I think it sparks imagination, specifically for younger people or maybe people that don't travel that much. They get exposed to things where they are like, what is that? I don't understand, you know. But if you have like a natural curiosity, it's a place where you can actually ask those questions like, I don't understand, can you explain it to me? And they would, you know, like expose you to different things to see and to read and to experience. And I think that's always very good for people. No, I mean, and that's my biggest gift in life, that I get to be exposed to all these things that I don't know. I don't know anything about it. The first reaction is, oh, this is so strange. But then if you forget about your fear of being exposed to the unknown, it's actually really exciting and it can enrich your life. No?
Yes, yes. So to be clear, so kids can come down and learn Moko Jumbi at Alice Yard.
At the Granderson building in Belmont. Yeah, they can. So Kristen has all these stilts, and then he works with children. Yeah, it's called 100 Moko Jumbies, I think.
Right. Yeah,
So
I've seen that, and it's amazing how quickly they can get the kids.
I think there are different groups, of course, doing that stuff, but they are definitely doing that too. It's amazing, because one of those times that I was in residency there, like, you know, all of a sudden on Saturday, all these kids come and they have different ages and different experience. So they are on these low stilts or on these very high stilts. It's really great. Yeah.
So one of the things I want to ask you is the meaning of the term contemporary art. Now, if I understand, is that any art or a specific type of art that is being made this century or last century?
No, it's, let's say, I mean, roughly, you know, to sort of generalize, it's art after 1960 up till now.
From okay, right.
Like, you know, like a rough, that's sort of how it started. Before that, it's called modern art. And then after, you know, like the art that's slightly different is from that time. And what happened is that it became more conceptual, and there were different mediums. So before it was more painting, sculpture, and after you started having interventions, performance, new media, technology being used. It was very conceptual. It's like, you know, the kind of art where a lot of people would say, oh, my kid can make that, or what is this? You know, why is this cube that I'm looking at? Why is that art? You have to sort of, you have to sort of really want to know the concept behind what you are looking at. You know, it's like things like that. It's also the art that sort of started being presented outside of established museums. So it's doing things in unusual places, for instance. And it's often not very sellable. You know, I mean, it's sort of like I do a performance and when I stop, it's gone. So, for instance, you have a very known performance artist is Marina Abramovic, and she sort of started documenting, like making photos of her performance, so then the photos could be sold, and at least she would have a little income, right? But it's very much to you know, yeah, like you talk about issues, but in a very imaginary way almost. It sparks, like you really have to think about it. What am I seeing, and what does this relate to? It's not obvious. Like it's not like, okay, I'm drawing a man and it's a man.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, some of the art that I would look at and presume is contemporary art, some you could look at and think, wow, I think they might be able to charge a good piece of money for that. And sometimes you have to really scratch your head. It's either you like it or you don't.
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And as you said, from talking to you now, I've realised that it's not all just oil on a canvas. It can be sculptures or anything in the artistic realm, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, you know, you might, you know, like it's like yeah, using objects and then making it into something else. So you know, a lot of people also would look at a kind of sculpture like that and thinking like, that's a bunch of rubbish. But once you look at it really well and you see the materials that are used, they are sometimes metaphors for something. You know, like for instance, Chris uses a lot of forms that are very typical for Trinidad. So it's actually talking about Trinidad just because he sort of draws a breeze block, because that says something. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you can say, why am I looking at the breeze block? No, it is what the breeze block represents. Like you use an object very intentionally because it stands for something. And so you have like a lot of that art you actually have to discuss, because it's almost like there's a theory behind it. You can either imagine that yourself, like, okay, why am I looking at this object? Where am I? Where is this artist from? Does it represent something? You know, I mean, read about it, and so then you delve into it. It's kind of like that.
Do some of the artists like put like a little notice as what it is, or do some purposely don't put any information?
It's both. Some don't and some do. So I guess that's up to the artist. Like, you know, there are some artists that, well, you just have to know. And others artists are like, no, I really want you to know what this is and I'm explaining it to you. Others are like, I want somebody else to explain it. You know, that there's all these possibilities.
So what does Christopher do? Or is it depending on the piece?
Yeah, he does different things. I mean, he draws a lot. But he also does videos, and he does installations, and then sometimes makes, for instance, like he was in the Saja Biennale, where he had them make this whole installation, and it was about labor, really. Like in the desert, had them make this installation, but it was filmed, and then the end result is a video, and that's what you then look at.
Is that the one with the scaffolding?
Sorry?
Is that the picture with the scaffolding?
Yes, yes. So that was in the desert of the Emirates in Sharjah. And so it's really talking about labor and oil. And of course, the interesting thing is this is a space, if you really notice, this is a space about oil, which is Trinidad too. So there are all these links. It's talking about something. It's talking about exploitation.
And I've seen one with a red steps, some red steps in a
yeah. So the red steps, it's called Home Portal, and it's those steps that you see. They are like, you know, it's the steps to a house. You know, these like, yeah, like you must have seen them everywhere. It's very typical.
Right.
And then, so he rebuilds them and he brings them out of the space. So there is a picture of the red steps in the snow in Boston. There is, you know, I did a project with him with the red steps. There's a picture of that too, like in Croatia, you know, and then he just places them somewhere. And then he always collaborates with an artist in the country or in the space where he goes to. And then they film it and make photographs. So it's this, that's why it's home portal. You sort of, you know, catapult yourself into another thing. And then there is something of home with you, the red steps. And then, so you know, like it travels everywhere. So yeah, you know, it's this imagination, because people would say like, why are red steps art?
or like, because if it's just there and people are walking past it, they're probably going to think, what is that? What's going on here?
But
and
that's
then just
exactly
walk straight
what art
past
is,
it.
right? Art wants people to think about something. So without you even really realizing you're looking at art, he's actually making you think like, what is that? Why is that there?
Yeah.
And then maybe you work further, you think like, that looks like the steps of my grandmother's house. You know what I mean? If you keep thinking about it, and that's what nice.
He's got some photos of hands as well, like stencils of hands. They look to be black and white.
Yeah, there is. I think that's part of. He's part of the, because he's actually he's a very well-known international artist, and he's part of almost all the big biennales, and so he was also part of the Liverpool Biennale, and there's all these drawings that are very recognizable. Cozier, I think, like he uses hands. There is like. You know, these things that they use for oil drilling, and you know, he uses Clark, so you see feet with Clarks because it's very typical shoe. You know, so there's all these, like, you know, if you're not from there, you don't recognize it. If you are from there, you actually recognize it because, like, oh yeah, that is what we all grew up with, or you know what I mean? Yeah, his work is being sold by in Trinidad by I Art Gallery, Yasmin Hadid.
Art Gallery.
Yeah, Y Art Gallery, like
Y Art.
And so, you know, like every so many times she does an exhibition of him. So, you know, you all should go, and sort of he would be there and explain and talk about it, and it's definitely worth your while.
Let me see what other artists you sent me here.
Yeah, I think related to the people or to the islands we talked about with food, right? So there is Chris, and Akuzuru is a performance artist in Trinidad.
That sounded like a very oriental
It's with all
name.
the textile. And she does all these performances, often related to nature, with a lot of textile and, you know, like
I thought one of the pictures was Mogul Jumbi, but it's not. It's,
and then, well, that's Kristen, you know, like he's doing that. And so Kristen also makes these stencils. So it's called, that's a project called Tooth Print. And they can all of a sudden appear in the street with like a phrase that is either maybe sparking a discussion because something is going on socially or politically, or it's like this very, it's sort of known expression, you know, that has a relation with. So it's almost like this stencil art that also was used a lot in graffiti, for instance, right? And then he does the Moko Jabi thing. And he makes also little booklets, so little magazines, publications, sometimes poetry, sometimes drawings by artists, etc.
This is Akuzuru.
No, Akuzuru is the performance artist. She's the female performance artist. and Kriston is the Tooth Prince and the Mukojambi videos. Yeah.
Okay. So guide me through some of these other photographs that you sent me here, because I'm seeing. Let me pick out one. I saw one that I noticed looked like a concrete block, and some trees.
Okay, that is in Curacao. That is Ailsa Anastasia.
You know, as you say, like when you look at some of these pieces, really makes you stop and look and think, wow, basically like a tall column with some branches coming out.
Yeah.
I'm looking at, there's another piece here by Deborah Azinga from Jamaica. It looks
Deborah
like
Azinga. Yeah.
a steering wheel or a seat.
Well, Deborah Entangled works a lot with nature, so she uses plants and sculpture, and she also studied. She has a PhD in biology, and so all of that comes together in her art practice as well. Yeah, she studied in the U.S., and she also has an art space and a residency in Jamaica. So there is a connection, for instance, between Alice Yard and her residency, NLS Kingston. And so they try to sort of get people from Trinidad to Jamaica and from Jamaica to Trinidad. So a couple of artists from Jamaica have visited Trinidad, stayed for a month in the residency, making projects happen. So there is all these connections also, which is really nice, right? Yeah.
It seems like a lot of networking going on, which is fantastic for them.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that's why I was saying, like, how, like yesterday in the talk too, and it's true. I think, like I was saying, how I might not have, any money, but like my wealth is the people I know. And Chris was also saying, like, my practice is really a network practice. And it is about the happy accidents, like, randomly, I can just randomly meet people, like that just happens to me all the time, like amazing people, like, I don't know. I mean, I go to a film festival with a film and I'm waiting to have an interview. It's like Sundance, and then if you have a film in the film festival, you get to meet Robert Redford. And so I'm waiting to sort of go in. And then I'm sitting next to this other girl so I'm like just chit-chatting, like, hi, do you have a film in the festival too? She looks a little bit like, surprised, like, yes, and I'm like, oh, great, blah, blah, blah. And then, she gets called in and I'm like, well, success with your film, in the festival. And then this other person comes to me and she said, do you know Nicole Kidman? And I'm like, what? And it's this actress, Nicole Kidman, and I just hadn't recognized her because she just looked so, I don't know. You know her in the film.
Right.
And like, those kind of weird things would happen to me.
So you're a filmmaker too?
I also sort of let that happen. I think I just sort of, when I was traveling in the Caribbean, I was going to St. Croix, and I hadn't been there and I don't know anybody there, but a friend of a friend had told somebody there that I was traveling, and that person approached me and said, well, I heard from so-and-so, a friend of so-and-so, don't you want to come to St. Croix? I'm inviting you. So I had to fly myself out there and they would like put me up. So I'm like, great, so I'm in the plane. I didn't really think about it. It's a friend of a friend. I'm sure it's fine. So I'm in the plane and I'm sitting next to this guy and he's asking me, where are you going? I'm like, oh, I'm invited by this museum. And he's like, oh, how it's called? I'm like, yeah, I think the Caribbean Museum. And he's looking at me. He's like, that doesn't exist in St. Croix. And I'm like, well, maybe it's the Caribbean Center. And he's like, don't you even know where you go? And I'm like, well, it's the Caribbean Center Museum. I mean, I'm just going to, to see what's there. So no, I don't know what is there. That's the whole plan, to get to know what's there. And this guy, like the man, looks at me and he's like, but do you even know the person who's coming to get you? Are you going to stay with a person you don't know? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm sort of thinking, is that weird?
Oh, you're thinking in your head.
I'm like, I didn't even think about it. Why wouldn't I do that? You know, it was just a nice invitation. So he's looking at me like, why would anybody just go to a place that she doesn't know? She doesn't even investigate where she's going. She doesn't know this person. And she just sits here as that is totally normal. But to me, that is totally normal. So I'm arriving and we're waiting for our luggage. And he's waiting. He's like, I'm going to wait and see who's going to pick you up. Because he's sort of worried, like,
Okay.
Why is this person next to me? And of course, somebody just comes and picks me up, and he's like, "Oh yeah, hello," and then he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And I'm going with this person that I now meet, who's saying like, "Well, you know, you're supposed to stay in my house, but it's like I have two really obnoxious children, and maybe they jump in your room all the time, so." We were thinking you could maybe, if you like, you could also stay on our boat. And I'm like, boat? Okay. And she's like, yeah, sorry, I said I was going to introduce you, but I give you a list of names. I actually need to fly to New York I have a gallery meeting, but I'm leaving you my car, and here are the keys to my house. And okay, let's go to the boat now. And then we went there, and I just stayed the whole time in St. Croix on a yacht.
Wow.
And I'm just staying there, and I have this car, I'm like driving around. And I'm like, here's this person being totally afraid for me. And I'm actually arriving in a place where I'm totally glamping on a yacht, and like I'm getting a car, and you know, it's like, and I'm like, but if you would be afraid to do that, you would not have had that experience. And so, you know, I mean, and to me, in that sense, as Chris was saying, because I thought about that since last night, I am like, I do get those happy accidents because I just do it. I just trust that it will be okay. If there is some link through something, it will be fine. And then I guess, you know, the one time in 1,000 times that it isn't, somehow you'll survive that too. You know, I wouldn't want to give up all these incredible experiences.
Yeah.
Meeting
well,
all
it sounds
these.
like you've had a lot of fun.
Yes, because it's,
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these generous people, and why should I be afraid of that? Like, because, you know, there might be a few horrible people. Are they going to make me not meet all these incredible, generous people? I mean, I had money to travel for 8 months to 8 countries. And because all this generosity of people inviting me that I didn't know, they just invited me. And you arrive in their home and they cook for you and they go out of the way for you. I traveled for 16 months and went to 15 islands because of that. I mean, the generosity I got in the Caribbean is amazing to me. And I think if we weren't so fearful of others, this is the wealth you get. I mean, how incredible is that? You know?
It's true. There are some amazing people over here. You know, even with, you know, because we're living in some dark times now, but there are still some shining lights for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe in that. I refuse to, you know, go into it's all terrible. I want to keep on looking for those people because I think if you really go for that, you'll find out that that's actually the majority. So why would I make my world and my life dark because of a few assholes? You know, I just don't want to.
Exactly that. I want you to pick out a few more artists from the pictures that you sent me, so we could show on the screen, because I think it was some some lovely stuff that you did send me. Let's see, we've got Tessa Whitehead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with you picking what you really like as well. You know, if you think like, hey, this somehow, it will be nice to see it back and see which ones you chose.
Yeah. Well, Tessa's got. I think he sent 3 or 4 photographs of Tessa. I'm looking at one of it looks like a white girl and a black girl looking at an obscure crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one.
So she's a painter. She's in the Bahamas. And so this is a series she was working on when I was there. And she got a solo exhibition in the National Gallery of the Bahamas, and it was part of that.
Yeah,
and so Tessa herself is a white Bahamian. And then, of course, you know, like, because of all the race discussions nowadays, this, of course, speaks to that, where for her, it's a given, you know, growing up on the Bahamas.
Some, it looks like African people looking up in the skies. It's entitled, oh, it's in French, We Are Here. Nous la ensemble. We Are Here. 2019.
Tessa Mars, probably.
Oh, that's Tessa Mars, right.
Yeah, Tessa Mars is an artist, a young artist still from Haiti, who's doing really well. She's actually at the moment in a 2-year residency program here in Amsterdam, but she lives in Haiti.
Yeah. You one of the islands you've been to is Haiti as well, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at a sculpture from Mike Walsh, Middle Passage Monument.
Yeah, Mike Walsh is a sculpture on St. Croix, actually. And he has a metal workplace. So what he did is, because he's a sculptor who works with metal, and of course it's a small island, so he sort of combined his art practice with making money with a metal workshop. So, for instance,
this thing looks huge,
he makes like these things from metal that you can attach to your roof. So when the hurricane comes, your roof doesn't fly away. So he's, you know, or he does metal work for housing, and that's sort of how, with his whole metal workshop, that's where he can make commercially some money. But he's also using all the machines and the metal to make artwork, and he makes huge sculptures. It's nice, eh?
Yeah, I've seen one. It hasn't got a person standing next to it, but visually, it looks huge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's small ones too, but he makes really huge ones too, yeah.
We've also got Merland Constance. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it.
Yeah, she's from Haiti also. And so she's an older artist she used to work in the textile industry, and specifically in making brides' dresses for bridal dresses, you know, with all these little paillettes, etc. And that was a huge industry in Haiti to, you know, for a lot of people working in it to make, you know, to have a paid work.
Yeah.
And because of the whole, you know, like us sort of sending all these old clothes that we have to Haiti, you know, we totally killed the textile industry there. So what happened is, like, you know, they were all being fired, first being paid less, and then there was not enough work, etc. And so she was a seamstress, so she sort of also made these voodoo flags for the temple. And then so she started making
voodoo flags for the temple.
For the voodoo practice. In voodoo they use these flags to represent certain deities. And I mean, I'm not I'm not a voodoo specialist, so let me not go too much into it, because I probably explain it all wrong. But that is what she was doing too. But she started you know, like making her own stories, like in not following the rules anymore, what traditionally a voodoo flag is. And so it became these artworks. And so now she, yeah, it's like her own authentic artworks that she makes, and she draws from, you know, from voodoo, but it is her own interpretation. It's very beautiful, and it's a lot of work. So I went to her studio and see how it takes forever to do that, because imagine it's totally built up from all these small paillettes, you know. It's so she works on it for a lot. It's very labor intensive, yeah, but it's gorgeous, yeah.
Well, Sasha, listen, I really want to thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, it was great chatting to you. I see you've got the audio problem come back again, but lovely for being on the show, telling us your experiences, and yeah, sharing it with the Caribbean and the world.
Yeah.
So, just to say, your book is currently out.
Yes, it's currently out. You have the link. People can order it. Like I said, shipment is rather expensive. So what you also could try to do, if from the region, like maybe order a little bit more books and then pile it together, you know, and then it's less expensive per book to get it there. And otherwise, just order the EPUB. You have it electronic, and you don't have shipment cost. Yeah, and I hope lots of people read it and use it, and it has all this very practical information for people working in the arts, but it's also engaging for people who are not in the arts but are maybe curious about it. It has all the contact information of people, so you can actually even look up what's all happening in Trinidad and go and check it out.
Yeah, and what I'm encouraging people to do now is to go to your, I know you're on Instagram, and I want them to subscribe. It's Sasha Dees
9.
Right. Yeah, because I'm subscribing now. Do as I did. Follow Sasha. You're also SashaDees.com.
Yes.
Lovely. All right. So yes, take a look at her website. As you can see, fascinating lady, lovely lady. Well traveled. I am so jealous of all the places you've been to. If I could go to like probably just another 3 of those islands in my lifetime, I would be grateful.
Hey.
You have a wonderful day, and thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you all for listening.